No man steps into the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. As we encounter a stream or river, we are aware that the water does not move only horizontally through the channel. It swirls and eddies, bubbles over shallow gravel beds, wells up in deep pools, barrel rolls on the downstream side of submerged rocks and logs, and twirls leaves and branches along its ever-changing surface. We are mesmerized, amused, enthralled, and baffled, intrigued by the complex and dynamic performance. We are changed by the experience, often imperceptibly. At the microscopic level, particles of plant and earth are swept along. As the water picks up velocity, it can move increasingly larger items. The volume of sediment, rocks, branches, and other debris can pose a threat to human infrastructure, bank stability, and water quality. These events have a more profound impact on us, ranging from awe to fear, or even dismay.
This is Main Street.
A river is doing one thing, moving water and sediment to the ocean. As gravity pulls it ever onward, the river and the land it flows through alter and impact each other. Low, wide areas are easily accessed by a flooding river. The water then slows and drops the larger particles it carries, soaks into the soil if possible, before the main flow continues its journey to the sea. As people move into and build on these floodplains, we often become accustomed to where the river channel is and expect it to stay there, well behaved, as we construct houses, farms, roads, and businesses on its shores. We install bridges and culverts to allow the water to pass under or through, but too often the designs are undersized with disastrous results. How can we better learn the ways of the river to better understand what we need to do in order to live alongside it while accommodating both the river's needs and our own? Thanks to the stream table provided by the Ottauquechee Natural Resources Conservation District, the Black River Action Team was able to visually demonstrate the workings of water. Floodplain manager John Broker-Campbell and river management engineer Todd Menees, both with the State of Vermont, presented the table and showed a small audience how structures such as culverts, bridges, roads, and buildings all have an impact on the movement of a river.
So part of the reason that we're doing this today is because the state of Vermont does a tactical basin planning process, and that means that the basin is the land that our river runs through, otherwise known as a watershed. And the state designs projects and programs and activities that will benefit water quality, that will help the river be flood resilient. It'll help property values, of course, and all of that. It'll help us with recreation. A million different resources that we all depend on rivers for. The public has a big role in helping the state decide, hey, this project could probably get done. Hey, we're seeing erosion over here. We're seeing some interesting water quality issues in our neck of the woods. And the state will then have a better sense of what might need to be done, what might need to be looked at more thoroughly. And that whole basin planning process is starting to happen. It happens every 5 years for each basin. And this basin, the Ottauquechee and Black River Basin, is Basin 10. That plan is due to be revised starting next year. So the more people can learn about how rivers work, how streams work, they can see what's happening on maybe their own property or in their own community, ask some questions, make some observations, and be part of that process. So I'll be sending out more information as that gets closer of public meetings, places people can do public input. And I just want folks to really get a good sense of how rivers work so that they can ask some good questions and good observations.
So what we have is right now kind of your typical Vermont river setting, right? Well, except for our fence already fell in the river. So it happens. So we have a stream similar to what we have out back here. This is around Menees Brook, which leads into the Black River. Sorry.
Thank you.
Wait, the Black River. Menees Brook comes down, Black River behind us. So we have houses, they're clear, they're a little hard to see. You can use that wood blocks as houses as well. We have some areas where we've already done some stream work. This is riprap. We have some culverts, bridges, some farms. There's trees in the stream. There's some dead trees, some woody debris down at the end there. And this is kind of normal river conditions, right? There are culverts.
Already failed.
Already see, we can already see.
Too small.
Or that our culverts are too small. I have a little stream on my property, and we have 3 culverts that our driveway goes under. Mostly it only hits one of them, thankfully, because I'd be concerned if it ever got to the 2 upper ones. So what happens is that this is our typical Vermont, scenic life, right? Well, what happens is that occasionally we get heavier rain. We can simulate by just turning the water up a little bit. Not quite that much.
So we need to replace this little tiny culvert with a bigger one. And let's see what happens. No, I'm putting in a too small crossing so that everybody can see. This isn't going to work.
That's right. See what happens when our crossings are too small to work there. And so then our water's, right now it's going through that culvert, right?
And some of the trees just got clogged in the culvert, which is what happened up here in Irene.
But when we get those more frequent storm events, we're not getting more rain, we're just getting different types of rain events, right? So more intense rainfall. So not soaking June rains, but 1 inch on Monday, 2 inches on Friday, and then no rain for 3 weeks. So we can have a little heavy rainfall events. We'll just watch and it takes place. So what do we see happening? It's changing. There's some erosion, especially down if we're looking down here at the farm, this farm field here. And what's happening is that the water is being forced to, it's being constricted through this smaller culvert, so it's coming out the backside of the culvert with more energy, which is why we're seeing erosion happening at our farm. So then what we would do is somebody would, excuse me, that farm owner would call and say, hey, my cows are gonna fall in the river. So we come in and we do things like this, we put riprap in.
And if you don't put in big enough, it fails right away.
But you can see all that happens is what happened. Did that fix the problem? It just pushed the water downstream, further downstream, correct? Yeah. So the stream is finding its way, right? So now,
oh, we just had a building fall in. The barn fell in, but the house is still there.
Our flood event is over. Life returns to, our small stream returns to a trickle. Our scenic, we're back to scenic pastoral life. But what we have to do is clean up this mess. And this is essentially what happened here on this property. Post Irene, correct? And we have the property owners here. So were you guys here in August of 2000?
Not during the flood.
Not during,
soon after.
We were here the day after.
Okay. Okay. And so when you guys were here, what did you see on your property? Mud?
It was a gravel pit.
A gravel pit?
I mean,
Yeah.
a money truck out of Glacial Hill came down into the sea.
Where we're standing here?
Where we're standing here.
In here.
The road was about 5 feet deep of debris.
I'm holding an aerial photo of this location, and that's a satellite photo of this location, describing what you've just heard.
And you can see this whole field was feet deep of mud and rocks, correct?
Yeah. There's photos on the internet about, used to be a sugar house in the corner. It was to the roof of debris and pushed the building to a side angle.
Yeah.
That much came up of money truck coming down the hill.
That is a famous photo of the damage.
It's normally a dry little stream by the time you get that happen. Nothing in it. So you can drive.
Exactly. So now we're kind of post post little flood event. Feel free to put your fans in it, touch it, play with it. It's just ground up plastic.
I want to point out to you, I purposely put in an undersized culvert. It's eroding here, 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 and here. It's already started to fail. This is called a landscape schematic. Came out of the Natural Resource Conservation, it used to be the Soil Conservation Service, soils book. And my wife Kate and I live up here. You're not seeing streams. They didn't draw streams on this. It doesn't matter. They're still there. So we've got a stream that's going this way. We live up in here. Came up over the mountain to get here, and we're down in the floodplain here. This is talking about the types of soils. Water seeks the path of least resistance. So we've got glacial till soils where we live, which are very compact, dense. Contractors will call it hard pan. And then this is glaciofluvial deposits. We had 3 glacial periods in Vermont that deposited this. Down here where we are in the valley floor, this is called recent alluvium. It's been deposited. And we've got this valley sitting down here. You saw me adding stuff. We're up somewhere in here on this table. You saw me adding little twigs here as trees. This that's stuck inside was up here. And this is the same scenario that happened here. When I got to that bridge, I got out of the car and first I went and talked to Midge and Bruce. And I looked at that and I said, I'm not going across this bridge. This is making me really nervous. This was the first Friday after we were landlocked on our side. We couldn't get here. I got here. Then V-Trans took it out and I drove over, I think Saturday. And you folks weren't home, and Rod said 5.5 feet. It was incredible. And somebody went with a loader, I think it was Larry Lyons, one single path, and there was water coming over the road for like 2 weeks. The power of water. Just that little tiny flow was eroding the pavement. And every time I'd go over, I'd be like, boy, they gotta open that up more. This is an extremely steep Money Brook up here. This is probably the Black River. It's probably like a 1% slope. That's a 22% slope up there, which totally changes. We can't do this here.
We can't do 22%.
There are huge debris jams up there of boulders and trees that, and this is from the Colorado School of Mines research report. At 22% or steeper, they get these big piles. And then the next major flood moves all that stuff and it goes down. That's what hit the bridge.
So here we had that small culvert, right? We had our small culvert. It was clearly undersized. So we put in a bank full width bridge. So you get a permit from the state. They would come in, the engineer would come in and say, this is bank full width. You design your bridge to be 60 feet long. The culvert might have only been, culvert might have been a 24-inch pipe or a 48-inch pipe. So it's a significantly larger bridge than what you had for culverts. But because we know that streams they need to have this natural space, this lateral space. They don't want to stay where we want them to stay, right? They're going to go where they go, regardless of what we build. So why don't we build to allow that stream to have that space? So here now we have a big full width bridge. And we try not to put big yellow machines in the river, but sometimes it happens.
You have to break a couple eggs to make an omelet.
Let's turn our stream back on. Kind of back to normal. Now it's staying within that bridge, correct? Right? So it's not, and the water is being directed. These wing walls are directing the flow through the bridge. And if you turn the stream up,
I'm turning it down.
we turn it down.
This time of year, we're into normal flow levels. If you recall, earlier this summer, we had a month and a half drought, and we had lower water levels then. And
June.
yeah.
June.
And now it's been rainy. And we have another system coming towards us called Henri that is going to hit probably sometime tonight. I think it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And I really hope that I don't see any of you next week because of flood damage. It gets very tiring to see wrecked lives and wrecked homes.
It is.
And so what I've done is I've put some of this. How many times have I now taken sediment out of that? Twice? Three? I think 3 times.
3 times.
Okay.
So that's just that's your dirt that's coming down Money Brook or the Black River, your small mountain streams. That's all dirt for illustrative purposes.
Yep. I had talked about a source reach where it's scouring. I put these rocks in here. You can see it's caused a scour hole, and that's typical at an undersized culvert. You'll see a big scour hole above and below. It's called the hourglass effect. I get out of the car, I've never been to this location, and I look and I see the hourglass, and I know when I get to the other side, I'm going to see another hourglass. Too small.
There's another effect of those scour holes, which is they are impediments to fish passage as well. So if fish are swimming upstream and they get to a scour hole, it's a purged culvert then, right? Fish can't jump. They can't make that jump to go up further upstream even if they want to. So they're limited in their habitat range then because of these undersized structures.
Social needs, economic needs, and environmental needs. Our state stream alteration permit, all of our state permits, we have to get you somewhere in here, okay? And everybody wanted them fixed. I pay for it, literally. I probably had 100 people. The state's going to pay for this. Well, when your refrigerator dies, we're not going to buy you a new refrigerator. Environmental needs. Oh, I'm an environmentalist. Pull out your checkbook. Nobody wants to pull out their checkbook. We have to balance. If we can get a bullseye in the middle, and that's not very often, we're very happy, okay? Usually it's somewhere inside that. Anywhere outside of that, it's not legal, and we can't permit it. So, scour, transport, and this is a deposition reach, and this happens all through that landscape diagram from the top of Killington down into, what is the bay in Boston? What's the name of that?
Long Island Sound?
Long Island Sound.
So all of our streams on this side flow to the Connecticut, the Black flows to the Connecticut flows to Long Island Sound.
On the other side, of course, goes different ways. The Walloomsac, is it? Goes south. Champlain flows north.
Yeah, into the Richelieu.
Yep. So we're seeing this all over the place. You have inundation flooding and flooding scour deposits. They're related, but they're a little bit different. Inundation gets into your basement. Scour takes out the house like I was describing in Chester.
Right. A lot of people think, when most people think of flooding, they think of inundation flooding, right? Mississippi River style flooding. The water comes up, it spills out over the bank, slowly percolates back into the ground. Yeah, your basement's wet, but you muck it out, and that's how you can go back in and you can sleep in your house and you can flush the toilet and you can grab a cold drink from your refrigerator at the end of the day, right? Erosion flooding, what this is, what Money Brook did, what Todd's example in Chester, those houses are gone. You can't go in and sleep in your house. You can't flush your toilet. If your toilet exists, please don't flush it, because who knows where that's going. And there's no refrigerator to get a drink from anymore, right? So the house is a loss. Whether it's physically in the stream or hanging on the edge of a cliff or what have you. So what we have in Vermont is a mix of inundation flooding and erosion hazard flooding. And we, the state, try to account for both of those in terms of permitting and regulatory regimes.
So John just put all of that sediment. This is what people want to do. Can I just fill the stream back in? Watch what happens. Why? The answer is no. Watch how quickly this is going to go erode away.
Okay.
And if it erodes away, where does it go? It goes into your backyard.
It's going
or my backyard. It's going somewhere.
It's going somewhere, and it's nowhere that we want it. So are there questions from property owners and folks in the room that we can answer? Kelly?
I just had a quick question. I'm curious to know if the table is able to model what happens when there's a dam, or is the water just flowing too fast for us to model a dam?
A dam.
I know a river's has one job that has two parts. It's moving water and sediment, as we've been seeing.
Well, so the water is just it gets deflected, right?
Yes.
There's
And it's on a little bend like that,
Right.
so it's always gonna be,
it's always going to want to find a spot, and the problem is that the more we try to manage our streams, like it just becomes this like there's no end to it. So what we try to do is to limit encroachments, limit new investments in this area, because we know that all you're doing is fighting like a constant battle, like
you can't win.
and you can't win, right? You can't win. Ultimately, you're gonna, you're gonna replace the riprap, or the riprap's gonna go further down the stream to protect your house or your bridge or your barn.
Same true of dredging.
Right. Same thing with dredging. We occasionally there's a few times where we do allow dredging, but typically it's not preferred, even though that's what comes to people's mind, right? Well, like it never used to flood and now it floods. Why don't we go in there and use our big yellow machines and scoop out all the gravel that has accumulated over the years? It fills right back up. I mean, there's example after example after example in the state of where we want to dredge, but we just don't do it. We've learned sometimes the hard way and the expensive way after doing something 5, 10, 50 times that's not the most effective thing to do. So that's why we try to limit new investments, new encroachments, because we know it's fighting an uphill battle.
That's research from around the world.
Right.
It's not that, we think,
Right.
we know.
Right.
And I've seen it, and it's really disturbing. I've had the question from Kelly about what happens with a dam. Before we turn the water on, I did this in reverse. So I've put a forest in here, all right? Now, I've been doing dam removals for about 5.5 years. This is really interesting work, very rewarding. When they take the dam out, which had been full of sediment, you're going to see that when we turn it on, the cut tree stumps are still there. And God, I can show you many pictures of different locations. And the older ones, it's handsaw cuts. And the historic preservation folks, the elementary schools, the local historical society, they get really jazzed about this because it's pretty cool. I've mimicked this. We're going to turn the water on. I put a little channel in here through the trees. When they take the dam out, they're looking to find that old channel. And then we've got an active one in Rutland right now, Dunkley Pond Dam removal. Built 2 years after the American Civil War by soldiers who served in the Green Mountain Boys with Ethan Allen. How cool is that? And I can go through the linseed oil mill, pencil mill, lumber mill, tannery, ice harvesting. When electric refrigeration came in the 1920s, that went defunct. Then it was ice hockey for the Rutland City High School team and practicing games. Then from the Rutland Herald, swimming, fishing. The dam already started to fail. Now it's failing because this piece of wood is buoyant, but that's a common failure mode with dams. Now, it's undermined here. And look at what's happening here. Now, we tried to fix it, but it's still happening. You cannot fight the power of water. You talked about Frog City Road. Your sister told me that your father had said in the flood of 27 maybe, that he used to fish on that big rock and it moved. And then she said it moved again. This is the type of thing that's going on here. If you think about, you drive your car down a dirt road and you get out to the highway and you got all this dust on the back of your car, that's the same thing that's happening. Air and water are same fluid hydraulics, a little bit different, but that vacuum is what pulls the dust onto the back of your car, and that's what happened with that big rock that your sister told me about. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, at the time, that's the biggest rock that I've seen. The one below the hydro dam in Tassville,
That covered bridge.
it did the same thing. It was sitting here, and it picked it up, and now it's laying in a massive rock. And I could keep on going. I talk too much. Go ahead, John.
Well, there's just, you know, we weren't terribly creative 150, 200 years ago when we named all of our streams. So if you think of things like the Roaring Branch or the White River, right? They're named because they were loud, or they had, you know, people saw that they had a lot of energy in them. There's Mad Tom Brook over in Dorset. There's the Mad River in Waitsfield, right? You have all across the state, right? You know, in typical New England fashion, we weren't the most wildly creative folks, so they were named because that's what they were.
Naming is cool. Now, somebody asked me, what's the difference between a creek, a brook, a river, a stream? It's who named it way back when.
Right.
There's not a classification, it's just random. Ottauquechee River is an Abenaki Indian name. Black River, White River is because of all of the bedrock cascades that churn up, like Buttermilk Falls is called Buttermilk Falls because it looks like buttermilk with the 3 cascades. The Black River, the rocks are black because of the geology on that side is different, a little bit of acidic, and then manganese is the black that precipitates to the rock because of the acidity.
I did not know that.
But the sediment builds up behind the dam, and there's a lot of different things, and I can email to you the one PDF of on-stream dams, dam removal, the all adverse impacts, and the benefits of removals, and there's a lot of them. Flooding,
Right.
reducing flooding impacts. So anyway, Dunkley Pond Dam, because it had been there now 294 years since that report was done, was just chock-a-block full. It was 13 and a half feet tall, full of sediment. I was told, oh, it was 6 feet deep before Irene, and then it filled in with gravel. I was like, yeah, that's what happens. They're taking the dam out incrementally, taking the sediment out, and that's when they find the trees, and when they find the original channel, there's a sediment sorting process where a rock rolls down, the next one rolls down, and they get like shingles on a roof. And the $100 word is imbrication. It's an imbricated bed. And very seldom do you see it not imbricated. It's natural bed armoring. And it's crusty. And it depends on the thickness on what's in the stream in that location.
Bed armoring prevents the stream from incising further down. So if there's, whether it's bedrock or imbricated stones, it prevents the stream from digging itself deeper and deeper and deeper.
Which is why we don't want to take out gravel.
Right.
Now, the crust, the natural bed armoring is hard. So after Irene, I'm telling the people, Bridgewater's a great example. And I fished that as a kid. And so I think it was about 10:30. Monday morning I went by and I was like, holy smokes. It was huge deposit. It was just that channel grade change. The water slowed down, dumped all this gravel out. So, okay, Bridgewater has the most number of road miles in any town in the state. They got whacked. Killington had 13 and a half inches of rain. It was the first time that the storm, I think it was North Carolina, it hit landfall. I looked at all the state mountain topography, and Killington was the first big mountain range that it had to hit. I don't know if you can see that in there.
I'm going to actually get the PDF.
Yeah, okay. So I told this operator, when you feel the hard crust, stop, because it'll create a head cut. And I don't know if you can see it right there, but that's what's called a head cut. And it'll keep going upstream until it hits the next bridge or whatever the structure is, causes it to fail. This guy had never done this before. So I'm going in that direction back in that time. I'd pull off, there's a pull off there. and I see the head cut. So I wave him down, he comes over, and I said, "That's a head cut." He says, "I was wondering what that was. I'm sorry." He understood, he got it. Now, so you take the sediments out. We're going to take the dam out, because does that answer your question? Yep. Okay. Yeah. A lot of water quality issues with a dam. The top water, 6, 8, 9 inches, heats up with the sunlight. That changes the water chemistry. And you take it out, there's no longer the deposit. It's phosphorus on the Lake Champlain side. Nitrogen is the
Long Island Sound side.
On our side, going into the Long Island Sound.
The TMDL or the lake. We hear a lot about Lake Champlain because it's here. The same like recovery. The Long Island Sound is under the same plan. They have a similar issue. So it's not, you know, there's a lot of talk about Lake Champlain, phosphorus in Lake Champlain. There's just less talk in Vermont about nitrogen in Long Island Sound, but it has the same problem.
The phosphorus in Champlain causes that cyanobacteria bloom, the green toxic algae. So Dunkley Dam, when we take it out, in a catastrophic failure, all of that 11,300 cubic yards of sediment impounded behind it. And the sediment management is a big piece of this.
I just have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thinking about dams and your Venn diagram, which I love these. Do you guys, I know there's a whole dam department at the state.
Dam safety,
Do they
yeah.
also use something similar where they have to balance like the recreational values, the property values, the economic, the environmental, in terms of finding that bullseye of what should we do with this, that, or the other specific dam? I don't want you guys to get specific necessarily, but
Dams,
balancing.
yeah. Dam safety, the top piece is public safety.
Yeah.
Dam safety, but they do have all those other considerations. Go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, I don't know. I was going to defer to Todd, since Todd does dam removals and I do not.
I work with the dam safety program a lot because there's only 2 of them for the whole state.
So there is a local, Todd, can you talk a little bit about the Amherst Dam
Oh, yes.
project?
So
I think it's more relevant to the folks who...
some of you may know, have been on Amherst Lake. There's a dam there that was originally built in the 50s by the company that became CVPS and then now Green Mountain Power. So there wasn't as much science of hydrology and hydraulics. Hydrology is what comes out of the sky. Hydraulics is how it moves downstream. Of course, now it's very, very well-developed engineering science. This is called a flood hydrograph. The amount of water, it's called discharge, increasing on this side. The amount of time increasing on the bottom axis, okay? So 300 years, 500 years ago, when it was just the American Indians and the bear and the deer, is this low hydrograph. The area underneath each of these curves is the same, representing the amount of water, okay? So I wish I had brought a pencil. Give me a stick. This will work. So this is before encroachment, before development, okay? Your house is called an encroachment. The roads and bridges and culverts are called, the riprap on roads is called an encroachment. We come in, not us in the room, European settlers come into America. We start building stuff and it changes the hydrograph. Again, this is the same amount of water under these 3 curves. So this is called time to peak, and peak discharge. Sometimes it's called peak lag to peak. It depends on the application of what you're discussing. When I first saw this, I had to look at this. I'm like, what am I looking at? Oh, we come in and build a dam or multiple buildings in a floodplain, and it drives the curve, time to peak, the lag up. We take dams out or we take homes out in the buyout program, and it's driving it down. We can never get it back to pre-development, Wilmington. Kelly's shaking her head, yeah. They've got a mark on the bridge. They've put homes, all the roads, etc., 100. And I think it's about a half a mile up that it's rock walls on both sides. I've never measured it, but it's a significant amount. Yeah. So with the Route 9 bridge right in downtown was built to match that historic armoring of the bank, rock riprap. And on the bridge, it's called if you think of a ruler, when you put a ruler in a stream flow and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, that's called the river stage, flood elevation. When it gets to 11 feet, okay, they call emergency management. They call VTrans. On the side of now the bridge is here, the town hall's right here. Flood of 1927 was our most damaging flood, and Irene was our second most damaging flood. It took us something like 4 months to get the road network back where it was passable to at least 2 lanes for emergency services and people going to and from work and school. 1927 flood took 4 years to get the state's road network open. Think about what the technology was then.
Right. Todd's gonna show you a graph. You can also find all of this stuff if you Google USGS Water Watch. You can find all the USGS stream gauges, and they're not on every stream, but you can find them on the Black and the Williams. You know, if you're down in Chester. I don't know if there's one on the Ottauquechee.
Yes, there is. It says Bridgewater, but it's in Killington. But nobody cares.
There's one in Hartford on the White and along Route 14. Also, look at the ones in New Hampshire. You know, I live in Wethersfield, so I can look at the ones on the Mascoma or the Sugar, because it gives you an indicator. There's one on the Black at the North Springfield Army Corps Dam, and they'll tell you flood stage. Like, what is flood stage? What is the flood of record stage? And it'll give you like current discharge rate, and it's going to give you it in cubic feet per second. Todd's going to talk about that in just a second, but just numbers are irrelevant if you don't have any context. Think of a cubic foot per second as a basketball, right? So a basketball moving past you is 1 cubic foot per second. That's 1 cubic foot every second. So now, in Hartford, is that 27 or Irene?
No, this is Irene.
This is Irene.
White River at Hartford. Now, the flood stage is 18 feet.
So 18 feet.
The flood of 1927, the worst, was 120,000
cubic feet per
CFS.
second. 120,000. So that's 120,000 basketballs moving past you.
Per second.
Every second. Every second.
Irene was 100,000 cubic feet.
That's a lot of water. And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, keep going.
I don't want to keep people over, but if there are questions, we are happy to say and answer questions. You can feel free to play with the stream table to try to build up what you envision. Like, you know, you live on the outside bend. The Pingrees want to set up and like look at how it works here. If you have specific questions about dams or Lover's Lane, feel free to get your hands dirty. It's just plastic. It won't hurt you. You can rinse them off. But I don't want to keep people from the last dry day we're going to have for a while, potentially. So
I appreciate that. Before you go, folks, this is this month our 10-year commemoration of Irene. It's not a celebration. Commemoration. This is a conversation with Ben Rose in Vermont Emergency Management, who's now a really good friend of mine. We were in a public meeting and somebody asked, Wilmington. Wilmington was ground zero. So he starts talking and I start talking and I type this up. This is a perspective. From the standpoint of infrastructure damage, Jamaica was arguably ground zero. From a meteorological standpoint, Mendon was ground zero. There was 13.5 inches of rain that fell on Killington Peak, coming this way and going that way. In terms of financial impact, you ready? The damage at the state office complex in Waterbury was most severe, with more than 75 million of damage. When I started the job, I'm looking out the window, I'm like, this is a floodplain. And then I see on my boss's wall, my new boss's wall, there's a guy in a canoe, because I'm looking at the trees, I'm like, this is a floodplain. From the perspective of which town had the heart of its community most devastated, Wilmington downtown. Looking at impacts on people's homes and lives, Stockbridge had the highest percentage of residents impacted. Roughly 1 in every 7 residents of that town had their homes damaged or destroyed. In terms of human tragedy, Rutland lost a father and son swept away in service to the town. 13 towns were isolated by Irene, including our town, Plymouth, and Grafton was the last town to be able to reopen that you could get in and get out. Single lane. Emergency services, they were totally isolated. I couldn't get to them in, I don't know, it was like 12 weeks, it was a long time.
To your point, like, everybody wants to talk about Irene as like the flood of record, like, right? Like, well, my house didn't get flooded during Irene. I lived in Weathersfield, and we lived in the center of town at the time. And it rained hard, and I went to work on Monday morning, and there were a few sticks in the road, and it was relatively, it was like, that was a big rainstorm we got. And I got to work, and quickly turned around and went out towards Cavendish, and I didn't have to go 5 miles from my house, where we might have gotten a couple inches of rain. Cavendish got 5 or 7 inches of rain. You know, Plymouth got 9 inches of rain. Killington got 17 inches. So I mean, Killington is not that many miles. It's not that far geographically from where I was at the time. So, you know, I try to remind people, just because your house didn't flood in Irene, it's somewhat relevant to people in Plymouth, but it could be totally different a mile away.
And those streams a mile away can have headwaters several miles away, and they're picking up a lot more that's coming in to where, you know, person A or person B might end up living.
Exactly.
And we're in Springfield, and we're in basically the Black River's floodplain way at the bottom. We're in the lowest 2 miles of the Black River, just before it hits the Connecticut. And I know at our place, it was pretty impressive. We were watching the rain. This is pretty cool. Wow, this is kind of humbling. And then, you know, we were watching the Black River go, fast. The next morning I went out with my cup of coffee to see how fast the river was moving, and it wasn't. It was just rising, because the Connecticut River was being impounded and holding it back, and it was all backing up, but it was still coming in from upstream. All the, you know, even with the Army Corps holding stuff back, it was coming in from all the tributaries, coming in from just the roadsides, the ditches, and that was probably the scariest event for me, was the day after, because it just kept rising. I've never seen it that high since, and I kind of hope we never do. Right. But there's a lot to be said for living in one place and seeing fine weather, or not as much rain, or not as much damage. But think about that. That really cemented in my head the watershed concept, because the land is shedding that water right down to the final point.
We have a map of our big floods, and I will email it to you. I forgot to print it off. We have statewide floods on average, every 13 and a half years. And so, what's that?
Yeah.
The year of Irene, the Montpelier, the Central Vermont part got the big.
They had flooding earlier in the year. And the lake was flooded, if you recall, as well. So the islands Grand Isle was flooding because the lake was at flood stage for weeks at a time earlier that summer. And then we had Irene later in the summer.
Both of which were 100-year storm events. 1% chance, less than 1%. So the dam that you're talking about in Springfield is a flood control dam. They're designed to operate empty, as opposed to a water supply reservoir is designed to operate full. So the Army Corps' protocol for releasing water, they got a lot of things they got to think about. Now, Our bank full width and depth is about a 2-year storm. The Army Corps uses ordinary high water, which is about a 1.5-year storm. Anything over 2 is going to go out. 3, it starts to get out into the banks. 5, 10. In Irene, Northeast Kingdom, it was a 10-year storm. And tell me if I'm wrong on this, John. Bennington was 85, Brattleboro was 82, Rutland was, I think, like a...
I don't recall all the calculations, but let's use Cavendish as an example. I think it was a 75-year storm in Cavendish. And if you were in Cavendish at all in September 2011, sure didn't look like it was a 75-year event. To imagine that it could have gotten 25 years worse, to a 100-year event. It was dramatic. So, yeah.
When culverts and bridges are undersized, a stream or river easily overwhelms them during heavy rain or spring snowmelt. Water, sediments, branches, and other debris can clog the opening. Under the best-case scenario, this leads to increased maintenance costs for the town. Much more serious consequences include road washouts and property damage, not to mention an increased risk to human safety. Even during normal flows, streams and rivers naturally move and meander, shifting their course over time and often eroding around a culvert or a bridge. Buildings, roads, and other human infrastructure too close to moving water are at risk themselves. These hard surfaces lead to more rain being washed quickly into the stream, carrying with it whatever materials it picks up along the way. Road salt, oil and gas, and other car wastes from parking lots, and more. Since faster water can move more and larger material, this stormwater has increased power to erode the banks of the river, adding even more sediment and fine soils to the water, smothering fish eggs and tiny macroinvertebrates, clogging gills, altering the pH, and raising the temperature of the water. All these impacts negatively affect everything from wildlife habitat to property values. Recreation suffers as well. No one wants to swim or paddle in murky water, and the poor fish habitat leads to disappointed anglers. We can take proactive steps to prevent these scenarios, or at least try to reduce the impact we have on our streams.
First, I'd like to thank everybody in this room, because I think everybody had a hand in what's going on in the last couple of days. People helping neighbors, making sure people were well taken care of. I think as a community, we did a phenomenal job. I think we all should be really proud of it.
Embracing a long-term sense of responsibility for the health of the Black River and all her tributary streams is the foundation of true stewardship. Landowners can plant native trees and shrubs along the banks of our streams, and the river creates a buffer zone to protect the banks from stormwater erosion as the stems and trunks slow the overland water flow, allowing rainwater to soak in rather than race on through. Communities can site new development as far from the water's edge as is practical to help strengthen that buffer zone, even allowing the river to move more naturally with less danger to homes and buildings. Homeowners can take care not to over-fertilize lawns, gardens, and crops, and to store and dispose of these and other chemicals responsibly. The State of Vermont's mission is the protection of high-quality waters and the targeted improvement of impaired waters around the state. Currently, the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources is updating the Tactical Basin Plan for our region, the drainage area known as Basin 10, formed by the Black and Ottauquechee rivers. Right now, public input is being gathered for the incorporation into the draft plan, and projects and strategies are being developed in partnership with local municipalities, regional partners such as the Black River Action Team, and other members of the public. Your input is needed. Are there water quality concerns that you feel should be addressed? Are there important areas you believe should be protected? Are there additional projects that should be included in the tactical plan? Now is the time to become informed and to voice your ideas and comments. Visit this link to learn more about the Tactical Basin Plan process and to review the 2018 plan. To learn how to participate in or attend an upcoming Basin 10 public meeting, contact BRAT Director Kelly Stetner at blackrivercleanup@gmail.com or leave your contact information at 802-738-0456. Again, that's 802-738-0456.